The towering palace of the Ryloth Empire stood as a symbol of power, its walls made of shimmering alien metals and adorned with glowing symbols of ancient technology. The heart of the empire pulsed with life. Warships zoomed across the sky above, and the streets below were filled with soldiers marching in perfect formation. The entire world was built around the Empress, the absolute ruler of the Ryloth people. Her word was law, and her reach extended across the galaxy, feared by all who dared to challenge her. But today, something unusual was happening. The Empress sat in her throne room, her eyes fixed on the holomap that displayed the movements of her fleet. Her sharp features remained unreadable, a perfect mask of control, but her mind was elsewhere. The message had come in just moments ago. A single human had entered the capital of the Ryloth Empire. He had bypassed all security, all surveillance, and walked into the palace without hesitation. At first, the Empress had laughed. A human? What a joke! Humans were nothing but a small, insignificant species, a fleeting curiosity at best. They had never been a threat to her empire. When the first reports had come in, she had brushed them off as a mere distraction. Perhaps it was a scout, or maybe just an oddball traveler who had somehow found his way to the palace. But then, the reports became more frequent, more urgent. No one could stop him. The human had walked through every defense, disabled every system with ease. Her best guards, the elite of her empire, had tried to capture him but had failed. Now, the message was clear. The human was in her throne room, awaiting her presence. The Empress's brow furrowed. This was not a normal human. She had read the old stories, the myths and legends that were whispered in the darkest corners of the galaxy. Some said that a human once brought down an entire empire with just a single act of defiance. Others spoke of a warrior, one whose power was so great that entire fleets were lost trying to stop him. These stories had always seemed like fantasy, something for children to fear. But now, as she prepared to face this human, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more truth to the stories than she had ever wanted to admit. She stood from her throne, her robes flowing behind her as she walked toward the entrance of the room. Her mind raced. What was this human doing here? And why had he come to her palace? There had to be something more than simple curiosity driving him. The heavy doors to the throne room opened with a deep, echoing sound. The Empress looked out across the grand hall, her eyes searching for the human. At first, she saw nothing. The room was empty, save for her personal guards who stood at attention. Then, from the shadows, he appeared. The human was tall, his armor a simple but polished suit of black combat gear. His face was obscured by a helmet, but even from a distance, the Empress could sense something different about him. He was not like any human she had encountered before. His movements were deliberate, calm, and confident. There was a stillness about him that made the air feel thick with tension. As he approached her throne, the Empress could feel a strange chill crawl down her spine. It was subtle, but undeniable. It was as though every instinct in her body screamed that this man was not to be underestimated. She fought to maintain her composure, to show that she was not afraid. After all, she was the Empress. Nothing could threaten her. Nothing could bring her empire to its knees. But this human was different. She could feel it in her bones. He stopped just a few feet away from her throne, standing perfectly still. For a moment, the two simply stared at each other, one, the ruler of an entire empire, and the other, a single human from a species thought to be insignificant. The silence stretched on, thick with the weight of an unspoken challenge. "Who are you?" the Empress finally asked, her voice cold but laced with an edge of curiosity. "What do you want, human?" The man did not immediately answer. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if considering her question. The Empress frowned, not used to being ignored, especially by someone so seemingly insignificant. Her eyes narrowed. "I am here to speak to you," the human said, his voice deep and steady, "and to put an end to your empire." The words sent a shockwave through the Empress's mind. She had heard of humans being brave, but this was something else. To stand before her in the heart of her power and utter such a bold declaration, it was madness. No one spoke to her in such a way and lived to tell the tale. Her hand twitched slightly, signaling for her guards to approach, but they remained frozen in place as though rooted to the floor. The human was not moving, not even flinching. He was completely unafraid. The Empress leaned forward, her gaze sharp and calculating. "You think you can threaten me?" she asked, her voice low and filled with venom. "Do you have any idea who I am? I am the Empress of the Ryloth Empire. I have conquered entire worlds. I have destroyed entire species. And yet you walk into my palace and speak to me like this. You are a fool." For a brief moment the human said nothing, but the Empress saw the faintest hint of a smirk forming on his lips, hidden beneath his helmet. It infuriated her. "You are not the first to challenge me," she continued, her voice rising now, filled with a cold fury. "And you will not be the last, but you will be the first to die for your foolishness." As she finished speaking, her hand shot out, activating the weapon hidden beneath her throne. A burst of energy crackled to life in the air, a deadly force designed to incapacitate any threat. The human barely flinched as the energy shot toward him, his movements almost too quick to follow. He sidestepped the blast with a fluid motion, as though it were the simplest thing in the world. The Empress's eyes widened in surprise. This was not what she had expected. She had believed her defenses to be impenetrable, but this human was evading them with ease. "Impressive," she muttered under her breath, though she wasn't sure whether to be impressed or enraged. For the first time since the human had entered, a deep, uneasy feeling settled in her stomach. She had made enemies before, many powerful ones, but this human, he was something entirely different. Something ancient. He carried with him the weight of forgotten legends, and though she tried to dismiss it, the Empress knew that she was standing face to face with a force far greater than she had anticipated. Her thoughts raced. How could this human have such power? How had he gained such knowledge? She had seen nothing in her lifetime that even remotely compared to the ease with which he moved, the calm certainty in his actions. And then, in a voice almost too soft to hear, the human spoke again. "I am the one who will end your empire, Empress," he said, his words carrying a weight that made her blood run cold. The Empress's heart skipped a beat. The legends, the warnings. She had heard them all before, but never had she truly believed in them, not until now. A human warrior, the one who could destroy empires, the one who could bring her to her knees. And now here he was, standing in her throne room ready to begin. She knew then, with a certainty that made her blood freeze, that this was no mere human. This was the beginning of her downfall. The Empress sat frozen on her throne, her sharp eyes never leaving the human standing before her. The words he had spoken still echoed in her mind, and a chill ran through her. "The one who will end your empire." It was not a threat, it was a statement of fact. But how? How could one human be capable of such destruction? She had crushed entire civilizations beneath her boot. She had wiped out species who dared to defy her rule. But this human felt different. The guards in the throne room shifted uneasily, some glancing at each other in confusion. They had been trained to respond instantly to any threat, but there was something in the air now, something about the human that made even their hardened minds hesitate. The Empress could see it, the fear, the doubt. She clenched her fists beneath her robes, the anger rising within her. "I am the Empress of the Ryloth Empire. I am invincible." But there, standing before her, was a human who made her question everything. "You are brave, human," the Empress said, her voice cold and calculating. "But you are foolish. You stand in my presence and speak of the destruction of my empire. You have no idea what you're up against." The human did not respond at first. His presence was calm, unwavering. He simply stood as if waiting for something. The longer she looked at him, the more she realized that there was no fear in his eyes. There was no hesitation. He was not afraid of her or her power. He was simply waiting, and that more than anything unsettled her. The Empress's mind raced, searching for a way to regain control. She had never been one to cower before an enemy. Her reputation, her empire, her legacy were all built on her ability to crush any challenge before it could even take root. But this human, he was different. How could a single human bring me to this point? Tell me, she said, her voice turning icy. What makes you think you can defeat me? What makes you think you are the one who will bring down my empire? The human remained silent for a moment longer, and then, almost as if he had been waiting for her to ask, he stepped forward. His movements were smooth, controlled, and yet there was a certain intensity in his stride. Every step was filled with purpose, every movement calculated. The guards around the room took a step back, their hands twitching toward their weapons, but none of them dared to act. They had been trained for everything, but not for this. I don't need to defeat you, the human said, his voice calm, his tone unshaken. I only need to show you the truth. The Empress raised an eyebrow, confused. The truth? What could this human possibly know about her empire that could threaten her rule? For a moment, doubt flickered in her mind, but she quickly pushed it aside. She would not be swayed, not by a mere human. Your truth means nothing to me, she snapped. You will learn that the hard way. She reached for the control panel beside her throne, and with a flick of her finger, a series of weapons activated across the room. The lights dimmed and the floor hummed with power. In an instant, a set of energy barriers shot up around the room, trapping the human within a cage of crackling energy. It was a weapon she had designed specifically for threats like him, a trap that no being could escape. The human would soon learn the cost of his arrogance. The Empress watched him closely, waiting for his reaction. Would he beg for mercy? Would he cower as so many others had before him? But instead of fear, there was something else in his eyes, a strange mix of calm and amusement. He raised his hand slowly, and without a word, the energy barriers flickered and sputtered. The Empress's eyes widened as she watched the energy field begin to bend, as if it were a mere illusion in the air. The human didn't even move. Impossible, she muttered, her voice barely audible. The technology she had created was flawless. There was no way this human could disable it. And yet, the barrier faltered and crackled under his presence, as though it were nothing more than a toy. The human tilted his head slightly, as if reading her thoughts. It's not impossible, he said quietly. It's just that you've never had to face someone like me before. With a single motion, the barrier shattered, falling away into nothingness. The Empress's heart skipped a beat. She had never seen anyone manipulate technology with such ease. But this wasn't just about technology, it was about control. This human was in control, and that scared her more than anything. He stepped forward again, closing the distance between them. The Empress stood her ground, but her mind was reeling. What was this human? How had he done this? What power did he possess that could bring down her carefully constructed defenses with such ease? I've been studying you, the human said, his voice low and even. Your empire, your technology, your military strategies, everything. You have a weakness, Empress. The Empress's eyes flashed with fury. Do not presume to know anything about me, human, she hissed. I know everything, the human replied, his tone unshaken. I know how you took down world after world, crushed civilizations beneath your boot, but there's one thing you don't understand, one thing you never counted on. He paused, his eyes locking with hers. Humanity. The Empress's breath caught in her throat. The word echoed in her mind like a distant drumbeat. Humanity. She had underestimated them for so long, treating them as insignificant ants beneath her. But this human, he wasn't like the others. He wasn't just a soldier or a diplomat. He was a force. You think that's enough? The Empress sneered, trying to regain control of the situation. You think you can defeat me just because you've studied my tactics. You think you can end my empire. The human said nothing in response. Instead, he reached into his armor and pulled out a small device. a simple piece of technology that seemed almost primitive compared to the advanced weapons of the Ryloth Empire. But when he activated it, the room filled with a hum, and suddenly every system in the palace began to flicker. The lights dimmed, the control panels sparked, and the palace's security systems went silent. For the first time since the human had entered, the Empress's throne room was plunged into darkness. "What have you done?" she demanded, her voice filled with growing panic. "Nothing you can undo," the human replied softly. "I've taken control of your empire's communications. Your fleet, your armies, everything you thought was yours is now mine." The Empress's heart raced. "Impossible," she shouted. "You can't control all of that." "I already have," the human said calmly. "Your empire is built on fear and oppression. But now you face something different, something you never saw coming." The human took a step closer, and the Empress instinctively backed away, her mind reeling. The power that she had wielded so effortlessly for so long was slipping through her fingers, and she had no idea how to stop it. "I told you," the human continued, his voice almost gentle. "I don't need to defeat you. I only need to show you the truth." The Empress felt a cold sweat trickle down her spine. For the first time in her life, she wasn't sure what would happen next. This human, this warrior from a species she had long dismissed, had already begun to unravel everything she had worked for. And in that moment, she realized that her empire might not survive the human after all. The Empress stood frozen, her mind reeling from the sudden shift in power. The palace, once a symbol of her empire's unshakable dominance, now felt like a fragile shell, ready to crack open at any moment. The human's presence seemed to fill every corner of the room, like a storm gathering strength, and she could feel her grip on her empire slipping with every passing second. "Impossible," she whispered under her breath. "No one should have the power to do this." The human had taken control of everything, her communications, her defenses, even her fleet. In a matter of moments, everything she had built was crumbling. She had ruled with absolute authority for so long, her empire stretching across countless worlds. No one had ever dared challenge her, but this human was different. He wasn't just any soldier or diplomat. He was something she couldn't understand, and it terrified her. "Why are you doing this?" the Empress demanded, her voice shaky. "What do you want from me?" The human stood silently for a moment, his eyes unwavering. His face remained hidden beneath his helmet, but there was a cold certainty in his posture that sent a shiver down the Empress's spine. He had no fear, no hesitation. It was as if he had already won. "I want nothing from you," the human said finally. "I'm here to give you something." The Empress's brow furrowed in confusion. "Give me something. What could you possibly give me? You've already destroyed everything I've built." The human's lips curled into the faintest smile, but there was no humor in it. "I'm giving you a choice, Empress. A chance to survive this, to see your empire live on, but not the way it was before. I'm offering you a chance to change." The Empress's heart pounded in her chest. "Change?" she repeated, disbelief in her voice. "You think I will simply bend to your will? You think I will just give up everything I've worked for because you say so?" "You've already lost everything," the human said softly. "The question now is whether you'll lose it all to the flames of destruction, or whether you'll choose to rise again, on different terms." The words were like a slap to her face. The Empress had always prided herself on her control, her ability to bend the universe to her will. But this human was right, she had already lost. Her fleet was no longer hers. Her people once loyal were now uncertain. Her empire was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, her voice barely a whisper now. "Why me? Why my empire?" The human's expression softened for the first time, as though he were truly considering her question. "Because your empire is a symbol," he said. "A symbol of everything that's wrong with the galaxy. The Ryloth Empire has conquered worlds through fear and oppression. You've built your power on the backs of those you've crushed, and the universe doesn't need more of that. The Empress could feel the anger bubbling up inside her, but she forced herself to stay calm. "You think you're so righteous, don't you?" she sneered. "You think your people are so different, so pure, but you don't understand. Power is everything. Without power, you're nothing. You'll learn that soon enough." "I don't need to learn that," the human replied calmly. "Because I've already seen what happens when power is abused. I've seen the pain it causes, the destruction. I've watched entire civilizations burn under the weight of empires like yours." The Empress's breath caught in her throat. She had always seen herself as a ruler, a force of nature who could do anything she pleased. But now, for the first time, she was beginning to see herself as others saw her. A tyrant, a conqueror who had brought nothing but suffering to the galaxy. The human's words hit her harder than any attack could. She had spent so long at the top, believing that she was untouchable, that her empire would last forever. But now, in the face of this one human, everything she had built was falling apart. And for the first time, she wasn't sure she had the strength to hold it together. "You have no idea what it's like to rule an empire," the Empress spat, trying to regain some semblance of control. "You have no idea what it takes to keep it all in motion. The power, the decisions, the lives at stake. You think you can just waltz in here and destroy everything without any consequences." The human took a step forward, his eyes unwavering. "I know exactly what it takes," he said, his voice low. "But I also know that the way you've been ruling is wrong, and it's time for it to end." The Empress's heart raced, a mixture of fear and rage surging through her. How dare he lecture her on ruling an empire? She had fought and bled for her power. She had sacrificed everything to build the Ryloth Empire, and now this human, this interloper, was trying to take it all away with nothing more than words. "You don't know anything about me," she hissed, her voice rising. "You don't know what I've done to get here. You have no idea how hard I've worked to build this empire. You think you can just waltz in and take it all from me." The human's expression softened once more, his voice gentle. "I don't want to take it from you. I want to show you a better way. A way where you don't have to destroy everything in your path to stay in control." The Empress scoffed, her eyes blazing with fury. "You're a fool. You think I'll just let go of everything I've worked for, that I'll simply bow down and accept your better way. You think I'll give up my throne for some idealistic fantasy." The human didn't answer immediately. He simply stood there, looking at her with an expression that was neither judgmental nor sympathetic. It was as if he were watching a storm pass by, an inevitability that could not be avoided. And in that moment, the Empress realized something that sent a wave of cold dread through her. The human wasn't just challenging her power. He wasn't just trying to bring her empire to its knees. He was offering her a choice she had never imagined before. "If you're so sure of yourself," the human said quietly, "then prove it. Prove that you can change. Prove that you can let go of the empire and make something better." The Empress's mind raced. What would happen if she took the human's offer? What would happen if she chose to step down, to end her reign and let the galaxy heal? Could she live with that? Could she let go of everything she had fought for? Or would she fight until the very end, clinging to her empire like a drowning woman clinging to a sinking ship? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time in her life, she felt helpless. The storm inside her mind raged, and she realized that the human had already won. Not through force, not through violence, but through the power of choice. He had made her question everything she believed. "I'm not asking you to give up," the human continued, his voice steady. "I'm asking you to change, to see the galaxy for what it is and not just for what you've made it. You can still be a leader, you can still be strong, but you don't have to rule through fear." The Empress took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the edge of her throne. She had never been more uncertain in her entire life. For the first time, she didn't know what to do. The Empress's mind raced, torn between the fierce loyalty to her empire and the words of the human standing before her. The weight of her position, the countless years of struggle, the power she had held, everything she had known seemed to be crumbling, unraveling right in front of her. She had always believed that power was absolute, that no one could challenge her reign. But this human, this singular being, had somehow made her question it all. And the more she tried to ignore the truth, the more it clawed at her. The human waited in silence, his presence commanding yet calm. There was no anger in his eyes, no malice. His expression was steady, his stance firm, as if he had already won, not by force but by the simple act of being unwavering in his beliefs. He wasn't here to destroy her, he was here to offer her a choice she wasn't sure she could make. The palace, once a beacon of strength, now felt cold. The energy in the air was different, thick with uncertainty. The Empress had built her empire on the foundation of fear and control, but this was something she had never anticipated. This human, this stranger, wasn't afraid of her. He wasn't intimidated by her power, her status, or her wealth. Instead, he stood as if the entire galaxy, with all its politics and empires, were beneath him. "You've come a long way to stand here," the Empress said quietly, her voice trembling for the first time. "What is it that you want from me?" The human didn't answer immediately. He simply stepped forward, his footsteps echoing in the silence that had settled over the throne room. The Empress's heart pounded, her body stiff with the weight of her fear and pride. She had spent so long at the top, so many years shaping the galaxy to her will, that she could hardly comprehend what it meant to let it all go. "What do you think will happen if I accept your offer?" she asked, her voice still soft, yet sharp with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "What happens to me? What happens to my empire?" "Your empire will change," the human said, his voice steady. "But it doesn't have to fall. If you choose to listen, if you choose to change, it can become something new, something better. The galaxy doesn't need another empire built on destruction and fear. It needs a future." The Empress looked down at her hands, clenched tightly around the arms of her throne. The strength in her grip was all that held her together. For the first time, she wasn't sure if it was her own strength or the crumbling remnants of her empire that had held her up all these years. Her mind flashed to the countless planets she had conquered, to the millions of lives she had controlled, to the lives she had taken. She had done it all for one reason, to build something greater than herself. But now it felt as though that very empire was a prison, one she had locked herself inside, unable to escape. "I've fought for this," she whispered, almost to herself. "I've sacrificed everything for this." "I know," the human replied softly. "But sometimes the greatest sacrifice is letting go. You don't have to destroy everything you've built. You can rebuild it. You can lead in a way that lifts others rather than crushes them." The words echoed in her mind, repeating over and over, pushing against the walls she had spent her life building. The Empress felt the walls starting to crack, the weight of her empire pressing down on her. For the first time, she wondered if she had been wrong all along. The silence in the throne room was deafening. The Empress felt as if time itself had slowed, the entire galaxy hanging in the balance. She could hear her breath, shallow and uneven. She could feel the cold of the room settling deep into her bones. Her power, once so certain and absolute, was now slipping away like sand through her fingers. For so long, she had seen herself as the center of the universe, the ruler of all. She had made decisions without hesitation, crushed any opposition, and believed that her rule was the only way to maintain order. But now, standing before this human, she realized how small she had become. She was not the force of nature she once thought herself to be. She was a ruler lost in her own creation. "Is this how you see the galaxy?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "As something that needs to be fixed, something that needs to be rebuilt?" The human nodded slowly. "The galaxy is full of pain and suffering, yes. But it doesn't have to be that way. There is another way, a way where strength is not defined by fear but by unity, a way where the people choose their path, not one forced upon them by those who think they know better. The Empress felt a pang in her chest. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in years, a feeling she could not quite name. Regret, doubt. She had never allowed herself to feel weak, to feel like she had failed. She had always believed that what she was doing was necessary, that her actions were justified. But this human, with his calm words and steady presence, had made her see that perhaps she had been wrong all along. "You ask me to let go of everything," she said softly, "to change everything I've built. Do you think I could just do that, walk away from all of it?" "I'm not asking you to walk away from everything," the human replied. "I'm asking you to see that there's another way, a better way. It's not too late. Your people still need you, but they need you to lead them with compassion, with wisdom, not with fear." The Empress's eyes widened. She had never thought of it that way. Compassion, wisdom. Those were words she had dismissed as weakness in the past. They were the traits of those who could not hold their own in the harsh world she had created. But now, standing before the human, she realized how hollow that belief had been. She had spent so long building walls around herself, protecting her empire from the outside world. But now, she felt as though those walls were closing in on her. The very empire she had fought for was suffocating her, and she didn't know how much longer she could hold on. The human stepped forward again, closer to her throne. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "There are others out there, other humans who will stand with you. You don't have to keep fighting the galaxy. You can be a part of something new, something better, but you have to decide. Will you choose fear and control, or will you choose to be a leader who guides, not a ruler who destroys?" The Empress took a long, shaky breath. Her heart pounded in her chest as the weight of his words sank in. This wasn't just about her empire anymore. It was about the galaxy, about the future. It was about making a choice that could change everything. Her hands, still gripping the arms of her throne, began to loosen. The strength that had held her there for so long was beginning to fade. For the first time, the Empress felt a sense of clarity, a sense of peace she had never known. She wasn't sure what would happen next. She didn't know if the galaxy would accept her if she changed. But she knew one thing for certain. She had a choice, and for the first time in her life she was ready to make it. The human waited, watching her closely. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if the entire universe was waiting for her to decide. And then, after what felt like an eternity, the Empress spoke. "I choose to change," she said, her voice steady, though it trembled slightly with the weight of the decision. "I choose a future where fear no longer rules." The human smiled, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Then you've already won." And just like that, the first steps toward a new beginning had begun. The alien Empress trembled the moment a human walked in. She knew who he was, HFY Sci-Fi.